Wednesday. Welcome to the garden. It's not heatwave weather in the UK at the moment, but we have recently had some ridiculously hot weather. So it's nice to be able to get outside and actually do things and talk. So recently I was invited to do an interview with a team from the Shadowcast. Now they are a YouTube podcast that talk about all things paranormal. And they invited me on to talk about mediumship and Reiki. So I was like, fair enough, we'll have a go. And they wanted to talk about the ethics of mediumship. So we had this conversation, and I've just realised I'm saying so a lot. If you actually watch the video, you'll see I say so a lot on that. So did it again. We talked about the ethics of mediumship, and we talked about what it means to be clear and everything that goes with having a conversation with the person and the spirit involved. And I just wanted to go through with you guys, from my perspective, a recap of the video, because I've watched it back and I'm actually quite proud of the way that I've handled some of the topics. I've not necessarily touched on them as much as I could have done, and I've not necessarily worded them as strongly as I could have done, but I've brought them into the conversation and made sure that people are aware that these are things that we need to think about. So we have a duty of care as practitioners, whichever way we look at anything. And I'm just swinging, I'm sitting on my chair in the garden, so if you're wondering why the background's it's because I'm swinging on the chair. We have a duty of care, and this means that we have to protect our sitter as well as provide that communication from our spirit world. So one of the strongest things that I wanted to bring through was that it needs to be an honest communication. There needs to be respect for spirit and for the person in front of you. And I have to be responsible, and that means that I have to focus on the well-being of the sitter as well as what I'm being told from spirit. And sometimes on the rostrum that can be a little difficult because of the distractions in the rest of the audience. And sometimes I have to be mindful and explain, and I do explain to the audience as well, that sometimes you have to not repeat information exactly as I hear it or perceive it to be, because I don't want to transfer anything that might cause harm to the recipient, and I will remain truthful, but I need to make sure that I have a level of compassion and care towards the person in front of me, because I want to avoid any physical harm to the person in front of me. Spirit's already gone. Whatever they say or do is completely irrelevant to what happens to the person that I'm talking to. So I need to be mindful that my words will influence how people think, and those words can influence then the decisions that person makes moving forward. And any careless wording that I may give, any throwaway comments, could produce unnecessary feelings, including fear. Some people have reportedly left readings distressed rather than empowered over the years. Not with me personally, but I have left readings distressed and not empowered in any way, shape, or form, because the medium at that point has given me the information in their way from the spirit, and as lackadaisical or comedy wise or whatever, I'm not taking it that way. So it really should have an empowering effect on the sitter, and it shouldn't be anything that anyone has to worry about afterwards. And it has to have a sitter's autonomy, has to be paramount. They have to have free will. If they're deciding that they're a bit uncomfortable with what's going on, then they should be allowed the time to change or have a break or end the sitting if they wish to. They have to understand that through the whole point of my conversation is it's a conversation, and conversations can be stopped. So if they want to end the sitting or whatever, then they can if they're not comfortable, if they find it difficult. I mean, I know myself when I've been to see mediums previously that I felt it's not necessarily too uncomfortable to carry on, but my physical reaction to the conversation and the emotions that are brought forward can be difficult to manage and then focus on the new information that's being given. So sometimes a pause is actually quite a welcome thing, a tea break and then a continuation, or time to reflect and then revisit in a few days, weeks, or whatever. That's also really important. So when we have a meeting or I'm on a rostrum, I always explain what will happen and if there's anything that anybody wants to do, if they could, for instance, if they could not talk to the person next to them and not give me information, and if they want to speak to me afterwards, that's fine. And if they have any questions after they've left, they can always reach out through social media for me, and we can have a discussion or whatever about the messages that they've been given. Quite often I find though that people will come to me the week later or whatever, especially if I'm working on a rostrum, and then I go to the church that I've been to and they'll discuss with me what happened. And it's amazing how people can take what you say. I mean, I have no clue. I just give the information that I'm given. I can't hold it in my head. I don't know everything. I have a sense of knowing when I'm giving the message, but I don't actually know it. And then for them to go away and think about it and ponder and then understand and then feed that back to me how it fits in their life is absolutely truly amazing. And that's why I do what I do. I also wanted to talk about when I'm working, and I mentioned this on the podcast that we do. So when I'm working, I'm switched on to whatever is going on around me. And when I'm not working, I'm not. So I'm switched off while I'm driving, I'm switched off while I'm at home, I'm maintaining emotional boundaries, I'm protecting my own well-being and recognising when I'm getting tired, staying hydrated and making sure my own energy doesn't get depleted. So I know quite a lot of people will perform, but what we have to understand as mediums is it's a different kind of energy drain when you're working. It depletes so much of you, so staying hydrated is really important. And as a practitioner, if I'm not at my peak or looking after myself, then I can't deliver what is necessary. And also, I wanted to make sure on the podcast that we remain authentic. So we can't make anything up to fit what we think the other person wants to hear. You can only give what you're given. You can't invent evidence. Well, you could, but it won't make any sense. And you can't alter what spirit communication is to satisfy the sitter. So on the podcast, I mention about other people's experiences and some of my own, to be fair. But there have been quite a few negative experiences where the mediums have had backlash because they didn't give the message that was wanted, or the person that didn't come through for whatever reason. Now, we can't demand of spirit, and we don't actually know who the sitter is wanting to come through. I mean, they might give us a name and tell me it's dad, but we don't know who the spirit is that actually comes through if we've got the right one to start off with until we have a conversation and a communication with our sitter. And unfortunately, sometimes the spirits that have gone will come through, and it might be somebody that the sitter didn't want to hear from. It might be somebody that the sitter has suffered trauma from. It might be somebody that the sitter fell out with for whatever reason, and they don't want to hear from this particular spirit. But this particular spirit's come through because they have a message that's important for the sitter at that time in their life. And as a medium, I can't say to well, I can say to the spirit that you're not what they want, can you go away? But I can't say, have you got whoever it is lurking in the background, can they come forward? Because if they're not there, they're not there. I can't make it up. And unfortunately, I do know that some people have been disgruntled by this and very upset, and that in turn has been transferred to the medium and not had a very good experience. So I mentioned that on the podcast because it's not fair, but people are people. People get upset, and these can be quite highly emotionally charged situations where people don't necessarily behave in their normal way. So we have to accept our own limitations, and we can only give what we're given. And I can't say like I have a skill to do something that I don't, and I will quite often say I don't know because I don't hold all the information. I certainly don't hold all the information that I'm given in my head after the sitting's done. I am quite happy to admit that some sittings, some conversations do remain in my head for whatever reason. I can still remember the one about the bridge, and that's really stuck. But I think that's because the imagery that was given to me by Spirit was so specific. And then a week later, the lady said that she'd been there, she'd seen it, she'd done exactly as I'd described, and that was brilliant validation. I mean, she was quite happy at the sitting time as it was, but to have that feedback later on was a brilliant thing to have. So I wanted to also talk about, there was a question on the podcast. Now, I don't know if it was like a trip you up question or if it was a genuine question, but there was a question about spirits being aggressive and having negative effects on you. And I did my best to explain that spirits will retain the personalities that they had in life. And so if someone was abusive or difficult when they were alive, that is the way they will come through because that's their authentic selves. Because if they came through all nice like, or started talking like me, that change in personality wouldn't then sit right with the sitter because they wouldn't recognise them. If they had a father figure that was a drunk for a lot of their lives and very abusive, and I brought them through as this nice cuddly teddy bear, that wouldn't be their father figure. So to bring through the evidence that the spirit gave me that they were aware that they did these things, then can link through to the sitter and help them understand that I have a relation that they can recognise and then have that communication with. Um, if I changed what the personality was, it really wouldn't be of any benefit. There would be no evidence, and it could be quite easily dismissed by the sitter as somebody that they didn't know, and then that would be that communication over. So I am very much determined to give evidence rather than a performance when I'm doing the readings on the stage, on the rostrum, or one-to-one. And as I say, the lady with the bridge, she understood what I was talking about. So then at that point, I knew that I'd done my job right. So it's very important for me to get feedback, negative, positive, whatever it is that the person says. But when you get that positive feedback that says that they knew, that they'd been there, that I described it perfectly. On the podcast, I talk about there was a sitting when I was on the rostrum, and it was an artist, and the artist had this brilliant way of looking at simple things like a feather, but it was like it was zoomed in macro, and he showed me, the spirit did, this zoomed in macro, and then gave me words, and I can't remember what they were now, but they were very specific art type science words. I hadn't got the fucking what I was talking about, but the sitter understood me and understood then who I got with me, and then the conversation developed. And at that point, that was like the biggest thumbs up I could have got, and it was brilliant because I didn't know what I was saying per se. I was sure in my heart that it wasn't anything detrimental or it wasn't anything rude, um, but I wasn't quite sure on the pronunciations that I was getting things right. But it all worked out well in the end. That was the main thing. That was brilliant. Um, and on the podcast, I talk about professional boundaries, and I think with professional boundaries, we talk about not giving readings on the street, at least I talk about that, and scheduling conversations properly. So that separates personal and professional information, especially on social media. I have two accounts, one for my personal life and one for my working life as a medium. And this protects me, protects my family, and hopefully avoids any client dependence going forward, because I have the expectations of what I'm going to do and what's going to happen set before any reading occurs. And it also, I had to point out that there's boundaries that we set as mediums with the spirit world. It can be as simple as like, I'm working now, you can come and talk to me, but you leave me alone when I'm sleeping. Or like if I'm working on the rostrum, I'll open in prayer, and that's my way of saying to the spirit world, right, I'm ready, and then I'll close in prayer, and that's it, me switched off, end of conversation. So that's something that I persist with because I think that that's very important, and I just really wanted to make sure to convey from my perspective that my duty of care, my authenticity and my professional boundaries are really important to me. I need to protect my clients emotionally. I need to respect that they have their own autonomy. I need to communicate responsibly, and I need to safeguard me and them. Having seen, been told, and then had recounts of situations that have gone wrong for many reasons, it's really important for me to make sure that we're all safe now, that I only convey genuine information, and I make sure that people understand I'm human, I have my own limitations, I won't embellish, I won't try and satisfy your expectations. If you don't like what I'm saying, then you let me know. But I'm not going to make things up for you, and that would not be fair. It wouldn't be fair on the spirit that was making the effort to communicate with me, because it's an energetic exchange for us as well. So it's effort on their side as well as my side to give you these messages. So I would make sure that whilst I'm maintaining that communication, that there are limits expressed, and my everyday life is chaotic. I can't do this all the time. I want to make sure that my mediumship is presented as a sorry, the sunshine's getting really bright. My mediumship is consistently framed as responsible, honest, ethical, and if they need healing afterwards, I can give healing. If there's counselling that needs to be helped through, I can offer support. I can signpost. I can give support to the person that needs it in sometimes a minor, little tiny way, and sometimes it can be major. Things that are said as thrown away comments don't necessarily get dropped off on the recipient side. Sometimes that little tiny chink or glimmer or one word can mean the world. And I hope that moving forward, as well as everything that I've done so far, that's what's come through, and that's certainly how I wish it to be received. So have a wonderful day, Ducky. You take really good care of yourself, and I'll see you again.